I see that Trudeau used this as an opportunity to also strategize on how he's going to go after Poilievre's Conservatives. We talked on the show with you. The strategy was you can't beat Poilievre, so we're going to brand him as a Trumper. And there's going to be all this rhetoric about how he's just like Trump and this, that, the other, and he's bringing American politics north of the border, yada, yada, yada. We realize that has now died down. But it seems like his new strategy, which is something Jen brought up, and we'll give her a shout out on this one, was based on this address. She said, I think he's setting himself up to fight the premiers. That's what's going to be about, the Conservative premiers, and make it about them, because again, he cannot beat Poilievre. I didn't know if I fully agreed with that when I first heard her say it, and then I saw the Liberal tweet come out about his announcement, and it said, watch Justin Trudeau on Pierre's premiers rejecting housing investments. One way or another, we're going to be there to get housing built for Canadians. And that right there, I was like, dang, she was spot on. What are your thoughts when you hear that? Do you think that's what this new strategy is?
I think you're absolutely right in that. I think that there is a potential that he does go after the premiers, because having a conservative incoming majority government with primarily conservative premiers across the country probably scares a lot of people, because typically you have a balance. I did hear another content creator who I respect actually bring up, I believe it was on his TikTok, but he posted it to Twitter maybe, basically saying like that the premier's asking for this televised meeting is ridiculous, and it's only happened once before. But I think we're in a trying time in Canada, and I think breaking away from what we've traditionally seen isn't a bad thing. I know conservatism is about respecting traditional values and traditional institution, but when you have such a large policy such as the carbon tax, it's a huge policy. It is going to be one of the driving issues in our next election. It's Pierre Poilievre's biggest thing, axe the tax. I think bringing the premiers to the table when you have not unanimous consent, but a lot of the premiers coming together being like, listen, we want to have this conversation. You're hearing it across the board. Even Wab Kinew now saying, listen, this isn't really working for us. We're going to have to look into what other type of environmental policies we can introduce into our province. Maybe it is time to sit down with those premiers, especially when it seems like there is such a massive divide between provincial and federal right now. And they are, at the end of the day, municipal, provincial, and federal are all supposed to be working for Canadians. But it really feels like, especially where I live, that my premier is working for me, but my federal government is not. And when you start setting up that battle between the two, I think it's a mess. And I think it's time that Justin Trudeau quits his hiding and has that conversation. But I really can't see it, because he's probably going to lose the next election and doesn't want to set himself up for any more failure.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really interesting, because even when we were at the conference, like Danielle Smith kind of like made mention of it too. She's like, she's like, I'm working hard in Alberta. She's like, you've got Scott Moe working for Saskatchewan folks. And she's like, and then Tim Houston in Nova Scotia. We're like, yeah, Nova Scotia. And then she kind of like stops for a second, looks over, and she's like, oh yeah, Blaine Higgs too in Nebraska. So I'm in the front row. I had to give him a shout out. But it's that idea that I love that he's like Pierre's premiers, right? Mm-hmm. And like, I think that I had kind of said, I think that if you were kind of looking at just Danielle Smith on her own, or maybe just Doug Ford in Ontario on his own, that he might have a chance. But the premiers are like actually quite loved in their provinces when they're working for the people. Like, I've read too much from Saskatchewan where they're like, we support Scott Moe in what he's doing, and the fact that he has, created illegal conditions so that it's just on him. It's not on the institution. And I was just like, that's incredible. And then we've got our premier here who, despite his most recent, blunders in front of the media, he's actually been really working hard for the Nova Scotian population and has been really working hard in healthcare specifically. And I get to witness that every single day at my work, what he's been pushing forward. So it's like, if you're trying to fight the premier, it's like, bad move, bud. Like, that's the wrong way to go. But I think that he's hearing the Liberal echo chamber where they're like, Danielle Smith's so mean, and Doug Ford's kind of dumb, so we're gonna run on that. And I think that it's exactly the latest political ploy. And I give Jen kind of like all the credit for that one. But as soon as she said it, I was like, that's exactly what it is. It's so right. But I do like what you said though about the fact that we are in different times. This isn't the government of when we were younger. This isn't Chrétien. This isn't a previous Liberal government. We have to deal with them in a different way. But I just don't know what it's worth. Like you said, like, is it going to change anything within a year? No. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally curious to get your perspective here, Jen. With this meeting with the premiers and Trudeau, we going to make this a pay-per-view event? Make this interesting? Put some stakes on the table? I'd be interested.
Bets?
I think we're in that time too with social media has changed everything. And that's why I do laugh when I hear takes saying, this only happened once before. Like, there's really no point. We are in a completely different time in politics. A friend of mine really highlights that on social media. His name is Cole Hogan. And if you search him up on Twitter, Cole Hogan, he is a digital comms expert. And that's literally what he does, is he breaks down digital comms, because the way that we communicate, especially digitally, online, political parties, politicians, the whole thing shapes our politics here in Canada. So I don't think that the premier's asking for this to be televised is by accident. I think there's a strategic purpose to this. But how Trudeau now responds to this is going to be very interesting.
Agreed. And I did find it really... Sorry, cool.
I was just going to say, what do you think the premier's gained by having it televised?
Trudeau is an awful communicator. He's an awful communicator. Anyone that's in any political strategy role in this country knows that. He is not strong. Pierre Poilievre is, and he's going to use that to his advantage. And I think that that's why he's been really pushing to have these premiers meet with the prime minister. Because I think Trudeau, with his back up against a wall with a bunch of conservative premiers, is going to be an absolute mess. And I think anyone knows that. Even if you're a Liberal fan, I think you can admit the fact that Trudeau is not a strong communicator.
Yeah, definitely. I just wonder, like let's say we get to the night, he's up there, he bumbles through something. It's a juice box, water bottle, speaking moistly kind of moment. We've made a fool out of our prime minister one more time. Well, he's made a fool out of himself one more time. I'm just like, what do we get from that? Like, what do the premiers actually gain? Like, they've just kind of exposed our our prime minister for just being a doofus again. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what do they get from that? Is it just so that they can build more support for Pierre, so that when he gets into power, they can get more kickbacks? Or like, what is it? Like, what is the benefit to the premiers to have this?
I think it's just them advocating for their provinces, right? Like, it's a way for them to say, listen, we're trying to get in front of the prime minister. We want to televise this so that what's being said, what we're asking for, essentially. Because people, especially in Saskatchewan, like the Sask Party and the NDP were in favor of fighting back on Ottawa on the carbon tax. So, I mean, this isn't just like a Sask Party thing. Like, you cannot like Scott Moe and admit the fact that this is kind of affecting everybody. So I think this is just our way of advocating and, again, putting Trudeau in the spotlight and making him answer to them.
Absolutely. And that has been the battle I've been witnessing, is the battle of narratives between the premiers and Trudeau. And that's what I'm seeing on Twitter is like, well, the premier, you just mentioned this in your panel. It's always the provinces. But people need to realize that there are responsibilities that the federals need to tend to, and the responsibilities the provinces need to tend to. And the federal is just not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're getting involved in things that really aren't their jurisdiction. And I think that is probably likely the goal here, is get these guys in a room, get it televised, and really show people this is what's happening. This is what we're dealing with. And I had a significant issue with Trudeau talking about, well, the provinces have had ample time to figure out a solution that isn't a carbon tax. And he was going on record saying, I've met with them before and I gave them the opportunity and they didn't do anything. And the provinces have been asking for a meeting before obviously this was granted. Provinces were asking for a meeting. And then he was asked, when was the last time you met with the provinces on this issue? He's like, in 2016. That was a year after you're elected, brother. Are you kidding me? And then you're going to come back in 2024, 8 years later, and say, well, I gave them all kinds of time to figure something out, and they didn't. It was mind-boggling. So yes, I cannot wait for him to get in a room with all of them. As you said, it's not just going to be, people are really kind of working this up to be a conservative premier showdown. No. Wab Kinu's going to be there. You have other party premiers who, like, it's all the premiers who are going to be there, who are going to have a conversation about this. And even, we'll get into it a little bit later, but when we have even the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, saying, we really need to rethink this carbon tax. I'm sorry, dude. It's over. And I think we're going to see that with that call.
I think that's just a dumb Hail Mary that he's throwing out there, Jagmeet, but that's just my 2 cents.
like I think he'll say anything at this point.
Yeah.
Because he's not going anywhere. He's gonna ride this out. Yeah, he's a liar, respectfully. But not only that, all of these people that are like, Justin Trudeau isn't responsible for anything, are going to be the loudest ones when Pierre Poilievre is elected as Prime Minister in Canada. You know that they're going to be putting in overtime on social media day and night. It'll never stop.
Oh,
and so, yeah.
Yeah. Shout out Vicky Campbell.